nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, it's official. The UK is now an immigration nation. 2 decades of broken Tory promises meant net migration soared to a record high of 606,000 last year. But Rishi Sunak still won't talk hard numbers.
Out of control, do you think, at the moment?
Well, no, I think the numbers are just too high. What is the dream number? What's your target number? What can people look out for? Well, I want the numbers to come down.
Well, I'll warn Rishi to get a grip on immigration or risk a catastrophic defeat to Labour's Open Borders coalition in my digest next. Then my superstar panel weigh in. And tonight, I'm joined by Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicol. Plus, former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe joins me live in the next hour to offer her unfiltered analysis on the country's immigration emergency. Also coming up, former Education Minister Andrea Jenkins, who was exposed by Sly News for criticising Rishi Sunak in bombshell-leaked Tory texts, speaks out publicly for the first time about the MSM and woke blob's witch hunt against Boris Johnson. She's fired up and live shortly. Elsewhere tonight, from car chase to court defeat, Harry and Meghan have had a very difficult week, both reputationally and legally. But will the relentless humiliations end up being fatal to the couple's marriage? My Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Danby, have new information on this tonight. And as royal insiders express fear Kate's Chelsea Flower Show visit stole the King and the Queen's spotlight, is Charles being overshadowed by another Princess of Wales? Paul Burrell, who witnessed firsthand the King's destructive battle for the limelight with Princess Diana, offers his unique insight in Uncancelled. Also tonight, is controversial Daily Express columnist Virginia Blackburn right to compare sacked This Morning host Philip Schofield to Prince Andrew because of the way they treat, quote, underlings? We'll debate that bombshell claim in the media buzz soon. And as an unrepentant Gary Lineker brags that he'll continue to speak out against the government,
does clearly cross into a political area where it's talking about the government. I disagree with their policy. I think most people do. I don't know whether it will actually be even legal.
So why is the BBC not just sacking this bloke finally? We'll debate in The Clash with ex-Premier League footballer Dean Windass, Labour peer Lord George Foulkes and social commentator June Slater. Tomorrow's front page is on the way too. New Greatest Britain and Union Jackass named before the night is out as well. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. This is GB News, Britain's news channel, and I've got a bit of an exciting announcement to kick off the show tonight. We're going on the road. On Thursday, June the 15th, I'll be bringing you Dan Wootton Tonight live from Lee with none other than the former Prime Minister Liz Truss. And we want you, our amazing and loyal GBN family, to be there with us. All of my superstar panel will be here as well. The exclusive town hall event in front of a live audience will see Liz escape the Westminster bubble to tackle the real issues facing Brits today. We're also going to examine how we can save the country from the anti-growth coalition. The political establishment might have thought they've silenced Liz, but trust me when I say she has plenty more truth bombs like this locked and loaded.
Not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
Ms Truss, enough already.
And Liz Truss has told us it's great to be returning to Lee with Dan Wootton and GB News. I want to listen to the ideas and the issues people feel passionately about. Getting out of Westminster and hearing the practical solutions to the big issues we face as a country is vital if we want to get Britain growing again. So, if you want to be part of the special live event next month, then apply for tickets using the QR code, which we're going to put on screen now, or via our website, gbnews.com. I can't wait to meet more of you in the flesh. Now, though, the news headlines at 9 with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story tonight, a man has been arrested after he crashed his car into the gates of Downing Street in London this afternoon. Armed officers arrested him straight away on suspicion of criminal damage and dangerous driving. The incident is not being treated as terror-related. Footage obtained by GB News shows officers dragging the suspect out of the car and then handcuffing him face down on the ground. The area was immediately cordoned off, but Whitehall has since reopened. There are no reports of any injuries. An eyewitness told us what he saw.
Police were very quick to respond. Children ran away panicking. We ran over in excitement almost with the cameras. And it wasn't long before the police had him out of the vehicle face down. We were pointing tasers at him. Maybe 3 minutes, there was like 10, 12 police vehicles, and it just seemed almost like emotionless. And then like they escorted him about 10 yards that way, and I got a video of him going across. He was white, grey straggly hair.
Well, in other news today, Number 10 has refused calls for Rishi Sunak to apologise despite failing to reduce net migration numbers, which have now risen to record levels. ONS data released today shows migration numbers rose to 606,000 last year, even after repeated government pledges to bring overall migration numbers down. The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, says the government will keep its promise.
Net migration is far too high. This is placing intolerable pressure on public services, on housing supply, and our ability to integrate people. We've made a very significant intervention this week, which will make a tangible difference, reducing the number of student dependents that come to our universities, because universities should be in the education business, not the immigration business.
Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak has welcomed the reduction in the energy price cap today, describing it as a major milestone towards his goal of halving inflation. Ofgem has announced the typical annual household energy bill will fall to a maximum of £2,074 a year from July. That's a drop of £426. Ofgem says the first price drop in 18 months reflects recent falls in wholesale energy prices. Now, 9 people have been arrested over the disorder in Cardiff that followed the deaths of 2 teenagers on Monday night. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and his best friend, 15-year-old Harvey Evans, were killed in the Ely area of the city while they were out riding an e-bike. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged showing a police van following the teens before their deaths. 15 officers were injured and cars were set alight in the violence that followed those deaths. 9 people have been arrested, as we said. They remain in custody tonight on suspicion of rioting. And lastly, police in Portugal have confirmed the searches near the reservoir in relation to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann now have officially concluded. Portuguese, German and British police officers have been investigating a remote area near the Algarve coastal resort where Madeleine McCann went missing in 2007. A source close to the investigation told GB News there is nothing to report after 3 days of searches. The authorities are sending any materials found at the site for testing. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and on the TuneIn app. This is GB News.
It's official. Despite 2 decades of broken promises, the UK is now an immigration nation. David Cameron promised to take net migration back to the levels of the 1990s, tens of thousands a year, not hundreds of thousands a year. That was in the 2010 Tory manifesto. He repeated that pledge in the 2015 Tory manifesto, where he secured a majority for the party. In the 2017 manifesto, Theresa May pledged to reduce and control immigration to ensure that sustainable net migration is in the tens of thousands. By 2019, with numbers at 245,000, Boris Johnson promised that there would be fewer lower-skilled migrants and overall numbers will come down. Today, Rishi Sunak doesn't even want to discuss hard numbers at all. During softball interviews on a daytime TV show, even more embattled than his premiership.
Out of control, do you think, at the moment?
Well, no, I think the numbers are just too high. What is the dream number? What's your target number? What can people look out for? Well, I want the numbers to come down, and that's what people... Well, look, these things are not easy to do. It depends on the economy, and we need to make sure... So pre-COVID, you were around 260, 270, that was your target? And the numbers that I've inherited are closer to 500,000 plus, and you've seen the numbers today, as you said. But look, my commitment is to bring numbers down.
And no wonder he doesn't want to talk specifics, given long-term migration was today announced at 1.2 million. That means net migration has soared to a record 606,000. That is an untenable situation, given the country is only building a little over 200,000 homes a year, not to mention the pressures it brings on our health, education and justice systems. But look, it's so much more than that too. We never signed up to this overwhelming change in our demography. Indeed, we voted against that time and again. The fact the Open Borders Free Movement Labour Party is now more trusted on legal migration and stopping the boats is an indictment on the Tory government. So Rishi Sunak, he needs to stop with his scripted lines aimed to appease our very real fears and actually do something bold. It's no longer good enough to just say that the Labour Party would be worse. And if he refuses, the Conservative Party simply must replace him with a leader who, at all costs, will bring net migration back to the tens of thousands. Otherwise, a historic defeat looms next year, and Britain will end up changed forever. But to respond now, my superstar panel, top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole. I mean, Alison Pearson, 1.2 million flooding into the country in a year, net migration at a record high after all of those promises, and Sunak today will not commit to a number.
No, absolutely astonishing. So last year, 504,000 net immigration. This year, 606,000. That's 2 Bristols, Dan. That's 2 cities the size of Bristol.
It's astonishing.
And are we? I was saying this to Sean earlier. Are we building any Bristols to put these people in?
Absolutely
no, we're
not.
not. It's literally, they can all come in and the population, the resident population has to just suck it up. And what we're seeing is an emergence, I think, in the government of 2 factions within the Conservatives. You've got the Treasury and you've got the likes of Jeremy Hunt, the sort of elite, bring them in, fill in the gaps in the skills, fill in the gaps in the jobs. These are skills and jobs that they should have been training young British people to do, instead of which they prefer a Ponzi scheme, bring in more and more migrants, do the jobs, the migrants get older, bring in more and more migrants. And so we go on, and then it'll be a city the size of London. And so it goes on. And then you've got the other Conservatives, people we've seen recently, the new Conservatives, the Red Wall MPs like Lee Anderson, Miriam Cates. Those Tories, they understand that this has an impact on real people's lives, on the ability of their kids to get on the housing ladder, to get places at for their children at schools, to have operations and so on. So you've got this very, very detached bunch of Tories looking at the spreadsheets. It's all about the economy for them. But the economy, Dan, is about people. People are more important than the economy. And I think this is going to be a suicide note for the Conservative Party if they don't get control of it.
I think I'd have
Sean
to say
Bailey, how do you respond to that?
It goes beyond the Tory party, doesn't it? Because it's the sort of metropolitan liberal elite who are not competing for these jobs, who have their homes settled, who have great finances and who have a pension. They're not the same working class people who've had their salaries lowered over the last 10, 15, 20 years. As a country, we've been addicted to cheap labour for a very long time. It's why most working class people voted for Brexit, because they saw it as their way of pushing back. But what I will say about what the Prime Minister did in a way, he did the correct thing because you showed a VT of everybody saying, we're going to bring it down to this, we're going to bring it down to... And they just set themselves up to fail. And Rishi Sunak has two tasks to do. Yes, he has to lower the numbers, but he also has to deal with a metropolitan Liberal elite. Because the minute you say something about immigration, instead of having a detailed conversation about people and economy, you're just told you're racist. So the numbers we have now are not solely the fault of the Conservative Party. They are the fault of the opposition as well. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, what will Keir Starmer do?
I know, but the problem is, we know what Keir Starmer will do. That's irrelevant. The only way for the Conservatives to stay in power is to actually prove that they'll do something different to Keir Starmer, which at the moment they're not doing.
I don't disagree. The Conservative has to do something. The party has to do something. And
but more than what
this isn't a race war. This is about the sustainability of the country.
I don't understand.
I mean, let me just quickly put something to you. Is it true that you say free movement is a gift?
Of course it was, because I've actually got some lovely little numbers to back this up. So EU migrants bring in 4 billion a year, non-EU migrants bring in 9 billion a year, and British workers cost 41 billion.
How many people do you think we can take?
The thing is, I think when the Conservatives have made...
but just as a number.
The number is irrelevant. That as much these people...
Well, no, the number isn't irrelevant.
No,
the
it
number
is. As long as the cost is it's not costing...
No, because where are these people living?
Hold on, answer this question.
How are they getting health funding? What schools are they going to?
The question that needs answering then, hold on, answer this question. Right. If immigration is, cost positive the whole time... Why do we have the largest tax burden that we've ever had? Why do we have to pay all this money if immigrants are making everything beautiful?
Well, the immigrants are basically running the NHS at the moment. So if you didn't have the migrants, you wouldn't have the NHS running. At the moment...
We should have trained our own doctors and nurses.
The problem is that Sean's government have cut training to those doctors, so we don't have the numbers of doctors we need. So we depend on migrant labour. We depend on it in the NHS.
Today is about numbers. Today is about numbers.
The fact that we can't handle
Today is about numbers, though.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I think you need to...
What is too much? Net migration. What's too much? How much can we take? Can we take 1 million a year in net migration? 2 million?
The numbers you've presented us with today are skewed because they include temporary migrants. That's the people we've resettled from Ukraine, the people we've repatriated from Hong Kong, and it also includes international students.
Okay, but what
international students bring billions into our economy. They also prop up our higher education sector and make it...
Not when they're bringing their mum, their brother, their sister, their daughter.
Who will use our services, pay into our system, buy products.
They don't.
But Dan, but this is the key thing. The mantra has always been that immigration adds to our economy. And for some years, that's been true.
OK, but Sean, what is it now? What number, though? What number? Because look, I am prepared to state a number, which is tens of thousands. Personally, I actually think we need a couple of years of net zero migration.
Yes. For a number? I would say below 100,000. There's your number. There's your line in the sand.
So much damage.
Sean, you said that Rishi can't commit to a number.
Yeah, but I'm not Rishi.
Basically now hovering around 500,000. That's outrageous. Just to make this point, Amy, OK, so we were promised an Australian points-based system.
Which we basically have, don't we?
No, we do not have that because they have diluted the entry criteria to the point that someone earning 26,000 a year can come in and be eligible for benefits. That is not a point-based
but you try getting into Australia. It's really hard, and that's the point. And no one is saying the Australians are a country of racists and xenophobics. What they say is they are a country that respects its own borders.
But you're not respecting key industries. The agriculture industry depends on migrant workers. Without them, it
would
collapse.
Living? I mean, where are they living?
And you can see
where are they living?
Now
where are they living, though?
But they got to that situation.
Where are they living?
House building is a completely separate issue to this. We need...
No, it's not separate. Amy, they got to that situation
of selling off council houses and having a complete lack of housing.
Amy, you simply do know what you're talking about. We got to that situation because we relied on that Labour too much. And if you're talking about council housing, are you suggesting that an immigrant would be eligible for a council house? That then means working class people who need those houses, who've been on the list for years, wouldn't get one. That's exactly the kind of argument you can't make.
We are heading for civil unrest. If you take that attitude, Amy, people will rightly say, we've lived here, we've paid
in the queue.
Where are the benefits?
OK, Amy, final word to you.
our woeful lack of investment into the housing sector has very little to do with migrants.
Simply not true.
Our society is founded and depends
all I'm going
on
to say, I'm just
migrants.
going to present the stark statistics again. We are building little over 200,000 houses a year at the moment.
Terrible.
Over 600,000 are entering the country. So figure out the difference. Where are those 400,000 living? Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey,
Don't forget
Alison
they're
Pearson,
making
my
10 billion
superstar
a year
panel,
as
who
well
are with
for the
me
country.
all night. Now, coming up with reports that Prince Harry's slinking away to a hotel rather than spending time with the Sussexes, plus all of these relentless legal and reputational humiliations. So is their marriage having a bit of problem at the moment? My Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, have new information on this soon. But up next in The Clash, as an unrepentant Gary Lineker brags that he'll continue to use his taxpayer-funded fame to attack the government, why isn't the BBC just sacking this bloke? Former Premier League striker Dean Windass, self-declared Chief Gammon June Slater and Lord George Folks debate that in just a moment. But what do you think? Dan at gbnews.com. Vote in our poll at GBNews on Twitter. The Clash straight after this.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11. Join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Our Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier coming up. But first, the clash. And Gary Lineker has sparked a fresh BBC impartiality row after he doubled down on his criticism of Superwoman Suella Braverman while collecting a bogus award in Italy for human rights advocacy. Now, I'm sure you'll remember this tweet from March last year, which saw the presenter briefly taken off air after he despicably compared the government's Rwanda policy to that of Nazi Germany. Well, after collecting this amnesty gong for being a multi-millionaire lefty loudmouth online, Lineker bragged to the hard-left broadcaster Channel 4 that he'll continue to speak out against the government and claimed there's nothing the BBC can do about it. Watch.
It does clearly cross into a political area where it's talking about the government. I disagree with their policy. I think most people do. I don't know whether it will actually be even legal. We'll see if anyone ever does actually go there. But yeah, for me, it's more about the language that's sometimes used generally across the board. So, you know, when they use words like kind of criminals and rapists and invasions and swarms, that's what all I was asking for is a little bit of kindness. And obviously, impartiality is really tricky at the BBC, and it's an issue that I think is almost unresolvable.
Well, Gary, here at GB News, we know that the BBC gave up on impartiality a long time ago. But what do you think? As Gary Lineker says he'll continue to flout impartiality guidelines and speak out against the government, should the BBC sack the Match of the Day presenter Dan at gbnews.com? Vote in our poll at GBNews on Twitter. I'll bring you those results shortly. But to help you make up your mind, let me bring in former Premier League footballer Dean Windass, the Labour peer Lord George Foulkes, and the social commentator and businesswoman June Slater. Great to have you all here. Dean, what I just don't understand, right, is that if Gary Lineker views himself as an activist, as someone who should go and accept these awards in places like Italy from Amnesty International, why does he not just quit the BBC and work in the private sector when he can have whatever view he wants?
Probably the fact that he's earning a hell of a lot of money with the BBC. All his comments,
our money,
the BBC,
yeah.
Well, our money, yeah, exactly, everybody's money, and but his comments don't seem to bother the BBC. Obviously, he's brought people into his home. Obviously, these people have got to be vetted. They've got to be checked out, because I wouldn't want to bring people into my home who I don't know anything about. To bring into my family. So that's got to be checked out. So fair enough, if he's done that and he's had them checked out, that's fine, no problem. But, the one thing about it is, the country's in crisis as it is, and you've got to look after your own. These people, the less fortunate people, they can't afford to feed their own children. Never mind bring people in. And Gary's obviously very fortunate to bring him into his big mansion wherever he lives. But yeah, listen, the BBC, they only know the answer, and we don't know the answer to it.
June Slater, do you know the answer to it? Because personally, I think they have lost any credibility as an impartial organisation until they say to Gary Lineker, sorry, you've got to go, mate.
Well, I don't know about people wanting more immigration. I think what they'd like to see from Gary Lineker is perhaps the award should be given to the British people for their tolerance this last few years, because Parliament, both sides, have been absolutely useless. The eunuchs, the castrated, they've just got mouths that say things that never happen. Rishi Sunak is not a leader. He's in the wrong job. He should be a supply teacher. And we've got a country here. We've got a country here that is so overpopulated with chances, and what the left seem very difficult. It seems like an almost impossible task to actually admit that there are refugees, there are chances, and there are criminals all coming in under the same guise. And the easiest way to do this, Rishi Sunak, is forget the Rwanda idea. I think it's absolutely preposterous. The easiest thing to do is when they're getting off the NGO boats and they're in the waters, you turn around and you say, ID. Yeah. I can't get back in my own country and I live here and I'm not criminal.
Indeed. But June, look, the thing is, Lineker would completely disagree with that, and he has a right to disagree with you on that. But what my point is, he doesn't have a right to continually push these views when he's paid by us to be the BBC's main presenter.
Well, it's trashing every single licence payer, isn't it? Because
Yes,
we don't
it
get
is.
a choice. He's got a choice to speak out, but we don't get a choice to say, OK, Gary, speak out, but we're not paying you. Because we are paying him. Imagine having to pay a member of staff that you don't want to work for you anymore. That's what it boils down to.
Well, look, I want to bring in the Labour peer, Lord George Fawkes, now, because, Lord Fawkes, you think we're completely wrong on this and you back Lineker all the way. But don't you understand why it's annoying for us to see this guy paid for out of our taxpayer-funded money?
Your biased and tendentious introduction to this piece shows the people exactly why we need an impartial channel like the BBC.
But they're not impartial.
Wait a minute, Dan. I travel all over Europe, and the BBC is respected in every country. It is widely respected as the most impartial, the most respected broadcaster in the whole of the world, unlike GB News with respect. And Gary Lineker has the right, just as you have. He is a voter. He is a taxpayer. He has the right to express.
But I'm not paid for by taxpayers, Lord Fawkes. Do you not understand the fundamental difference there? I do express my opinion, but I'm funded by the private company.
Who pays you, Dad?
My boss is at GB News.
Where does GB News get its money from?
They are a privately owned company.
Well, where does it get its money from? Where do the private owners get the money from?
What do you mean?
They get it from us. They get it from people like us, of course. It's just like the newspapers. It's just like the newspapers. The Daily Mail is owned by Lord Rothermere. The Telegraph is owned by the Barclay brothers.
No, but they're funded through advertising. They're all private companies who are funded through advertising, like GB News.
Come on, you've had enough. You've spoken enough. They live in tax havens, the Rothermeres and the Barclay brothers. And they pump out anti-Labour and right-wing propaganda through the Daily Mail and through the Telegraph.
Well, that's capitalism. That's capitalism. And you must understand that there is a real difference with the BBC allowing their main presenter to spout highly politicised garbage on a constant basis. And I would just pick you up on one thing, Lord Fawkes. Do you genuinely believe that the BBC was unbiased, for example, over the course of the Brexit referendum? Because even the bosses of the BBC have admitted that they weren't.
Well, let's... if you want to talk about the Brexit referendum, I could go on for hours about the Russian interference, about a whole range of things, which is why we ended up with a disaster of Brexit that we've got at the moment, which is why we've ended up with prices zooming up, with the NHS under pressure because of Brexit. But I want you to think about Marcus Rashford. Mm-hmm. Marcus Rashford raised the issue of free school meals. The government, the Tory government, started to rubbish him, first of all. And then they realised that the public were behind him, and they changed. And Marcus Rashford won. And now thousands...
Yes, but it wouldn't be appropriate for Marcus Rashford to host a show on the BBC.
Who didn't get free school meals are getting free school meals.
OK, June Slater, I can see you want to come back in here.
It's people like Gary Lineker you want to listen to. People like Marcus Rashford you want to listen to.
Well, you would say that. You would say that because you agree with them politically. You agree with them politically. I have both sides of the argument on because we've got you here right now, Lord Fawkes. But the fact is, GB News is a privately owned company, doesn't ask for any taxpayer money, and we're about to go to some ad breaks soon because that's what pays our wages. June Slater, I think you wanted to come in.
Exactly. And where do the ads get their money from? Where do the people who are advertising on your channel?
Lord Fawkes, just let June Slater respond.
They get them from us as well. You know, you're crazy.
Yes, but that's a choice. That's a choice. You must understand that that's a choice. We don't get a choice about whether we're paying for the BBC. Let June Slater come in. She wants to respond.
Well, first of all, stop saying that Brexit is a shambles. What's a shambles is locking down 7 weeks after we left the European Union and a set of wazzocks, absolute wazzocks in the House of Commons who were trying to closely align us back into the most politically failed organisation. It's a Ponzi scheme. It's a communist Ponzi scheme. So let's just put Brexit in the box. Because I'll speak to Lord Fawkes on his own about Brexit. Don't start laughing and mocking people when you claim you're £300 a day for turning up and having a sleep.
I've
At
never
the end
heard
of the
such
day, we have to
nonsense.
pay for
OK,
lots
don't
of
speak
things that
over each
aren't
other, please.
true. We don't... Lord Fox has had his say. And at the end of the day, with Gary Lineker...
Describe a communist Ponzi scheme. I've never heard such nonsense.
Lord Fox, let June Slater make a final point about Gary Lineker, please.
Gary Lineker is paid directly by the taxpayer. Any other news channel is not paid in that way. And as a taxpayer who's paying for him, I have a right to say I'm not happy with the employee that I'm paying for. And therefore, he should reel his neck in, and he should thank the British people. Let's see Gary Lineker for once say
final word to Lord Fox. Lord Fox wants to make a final point. We'll let him make a final point, Lord Fox.
Well, of course you have the right to say that. That's what I'm saying. Just as you have the right, just as Dean has the right, just as Dan has the right, even though he talks total nonsense, you have all the right to say it, but so does Gary Lineker. And then you're
oh, yes, I'm glad you agree he speaks nonsense.
Because you don't want to hear his point of view.
Well, no, I'm happy to hear it. I'm not happy to pay for it, and I think there's a fundamental difference. So, look, thank you for the spirited debate, Dean Windass, Labour peer Lord George Foulkes, and the social commentator June Slater. But who do you agree with on this? Should the BBC just sack Gary Lineker now? Well, Stooge on Twitter writes, Gary was given 1 golden boot for the most goals scored at the World Cup in 1986. He now needs the other golden boot. Boom, boom, boom. Love that. David on Twitter writes, whatever happens, it would be great to see changes with the main BBC Sport commentators. There are some fantastic and passionate talent they should focus on. And from Megan, immediately, better still, dump the licence fee and make them survive. Supply and demand. Your verdict's now in. 66% of you agree that the BBC should sack Gary Lineker, while 34% of you say they should not. Now, coming up, as it's revealed, Indians crossed the Channel in record numbers and have been the second largest cohort in 2023. Does this prove that economic migrants are taking advantage of our open borders? Our political firebrand Anne Widdecombe joins me soon. But next, Harry and Meghan have had a very difficult week, both reputationally and legally. But will the relentless humiliations end up being difficult for the couple's marriage? My Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, join me in just a moment.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate. Both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Our royal masterminds are up, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, and it's been a disastrous week, both reputationally and legally for the Sussexes, after their dubious near-catastrophic car chase in New York, and Prince Harry losing his latest High Court bid to use the UK police force as personal security. So perhaps wallowing, the couple failed to acknowledge their 5-year wedding anniversary, while Meghan snubbed another glitzy gala in LA, where she won Best Entertainment Podcast for her dreadful show Archetypes. I'm sorry, that award must be a fix. It's got to be a fix. But could these considerable woes be putting a bit of pressure on their marriage? Well, fascinating insight has come from the Daily Telegraph's GB News star Camilla Tominey, who revealed that Harry often sleeps alone at a local Montecito hotel, even when Meghan and the kids are home. Separately, when he's in LA, a 2-hour drive from Montecito, sources at a second hotel said their venue, quote, seems to be Harry's escape place. Now, Lady C, I know you have been reporting on the trouble in the Sussexes' marriage for some time. So do you think these reports from Camilla are accurate?
Well, of course, we know anything Camilla says. If it's not accurate, it's because she was deliberately misinformed, because Camilla is very, very sound. And yeah, there have been problems in the marriage, supposedly, for some time. I mean, I've been saying it, you know. I have heard from 5 totally reliable sources that Harry called in the lawyers some months ago. The problem is that the information doesn't necessarily match up with their public face. But of course, their public face is to an extent slapped on for monetary gain. And also, if there are real problems in the marriage, which there do appear to be, Harry's going to have a heck of a time extricating himself, because he has been very overt about all of his failings and all of his drug taking, etc. So he's not in a very good position in terms legally, in terms of preserving his position, especially in terms of custody of the children. But I don't know that it's got to that stage yet. And you also have to be very careful what you believe, because anything emanating from Montecito can very easily be a lie.
Well, we do know that now.
Disinformation.
Yeah, and we know that now. We've seen that. But Phil Dampier, obviously I have to put the other side of this. Sources close to Harry and Meghan insist that everything's completely fine, Phil, and that they're very happy. What are you hearing, Phil?
I haven't got any hard information. Good evening, Dan. I haven't got any hard information on this. I do find it incredible that, I mean, first of all, that 5 years they've been married. I mean, it's unbelievable, isn't it, the way 5 years has flown by. I do find it strange they didn't post anything on social media. For a couple who used to love being the centre of attention, you would have thought they would have done something to mark the occasion. And when you think about it, they've now known each other, nearly 7 years, haven't they? So maybe it's what they used to call in the old days the 7-year itch. I don't know, but why on earth would Harry start using a hotel room separately? I mean, that is extremely strange. But I don't think things are going well. He's not winning the court cases. I think he's bitten off more than he could chew there. And I wouldn't be surprised if they are under stress. But I don't have any hard information, but it wouldn't surprise me if behind the scenes things are starting to fall apart. She doesn't seem to support him in public, despite the fact that he always supports her as she's picking up an award or doing anything else. So it does look a bit odd.
Now, look, as I just mentioned, Meghan has somehow bagged this award for that awful podcast Archetypes for Spotify, in which she complained about her experience as a briefcase girl on Deal or No Deal and made to feel like a bimbo.
Paint the picture for you that before the tapings of the show, all the girls, we would line up and there were different stations for having your lashes put on or your extensions put in or the padding in your bra. We were even given spray tan vouchers each week because there was a very cookie cutter idea of precisely what we should look like. It was solely about beauty and not necessarily about brains.
But the boss of Deal or No Deal has now hit back at Meghan, defending the shows. This is Lucas Green, the Chief Content Officer at the company Bannister, and he told Variety magazine, we're constantly evolving the format so that it isn't the same show it was 15 years ago. But Lady C, I mean, I don't remember anyone forcing Meghan to become a briefcase girl on the show.
Well, I mean, everything she says is total nonsense because, first of all, the show is about delectable girls and it's about their beauty. It's about their attractiveness. It's about their vivacity. And every single other woman on that show who has achieved more than Meghan has achieved has said what a wonderful opportunity it was and what marvellous employers they were. And my information, which I got from somebody very, very close to the show, was that, in fact, the presenter, whose name escapes me at the moment, happily married man, Meghan was...
Maybe Howie Mandel, is that who it was?
What?
I think it's him. I think it was Howie Mandel.
That's right, Howie Mandel. Howie Mandel, Meghan zeroed in on him. She was full of ideas. She was sort of, very, very Meghan. And his wife said, sorry, you've got to get rid of her. And he got rid of her because Meghan was using him as yet another stepping stone.
Okay, but you're not saying, you're saying what, she was a bit flirty? Bit flirty?
Very flirty and very suggestive. And of course, Meghan being Meghan, she wanted her role expanded, as she was going to have the role expanded in every way possible, not only personally but professionally and financially. And Mrs. Mandel said, enough, get rid of her. She's trouble.
Wow.
And they got rid of her.
I mean, Phil, sometimes women can be jealous of other women, though, and maybe it was because Meghan was a beautiful woman.
Well, ladies, if they took beauty out of some of these game shows, they'd be pretty dreadful, wouldn't they? It's all just rewriting history, isn't it? After the Me Too movement and this modern day obsession with political correctness and everything else.
Well, the point is, she signed up to the job, Phil. She didn't have to do it. She said she was a feminist when she was a 7-year-old. She didn't have to do the job.
No, she was an intelligent woman. She knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to be spotted like so many aspiring actors and actresses, and what's wrong with that? But I mean, if this is the way she's going to rewrite some of these things, can you imagine what she's going to rewrite in her life if she comes out with a book? I mean, my God, it's going to be, every chapter is going to be
Oh, my goodness. We're going to need to get Lady C to fact-check every single word. Look, my royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell, Phil Dampier, lots of insight as ever. We'll speak next week. Thank you both so much. But coming up, as the COVID inquiry uses legal threats to try and seize Boris Johnson's WhatsApp messages, is the establishment pursuing a vendetta against the former PM, as his ex-aide claims? And does handing the messages of senior ministers to that inquiry set a dangerous precedent? My superstar panel debate that shortly. But next, as it's revealed, Indian nationals crossed the channel in record numbers and have been the second largest cohort in 2023. Does this prove that economic migrants are taking advantage of our open borders? Political firebrand Anne Widdecombe is live in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends were like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News. The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Time now for Big Witty Style with former Tory Minister Anne Widdecombe, and bombshell figures today revealed that net migration into Britain has hit a record high of 606,000, with work and student visas making up the bulk of that shocking statistic. And amongst those legal migrants, it is Indians who lead both the UK's work and student visa tally, with skilled worker visas granted to Indian applicants rising a staggering 63% in just 1 year. But Indian nationals are seemingly gaming the system too, with people from the country making up the second highest cohort of illegal small boat arrivals in 2023, with 670 so far, trailing only behind the 898 from Afghanistan. Now, Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick vowed to crack down earlier today.
If you come here illegally in a small boat, you will have no right to remain in the UK. You'll either be returned home to a safe country like Albania or to a safe third country like Rwanda. That is the kind of tough but fair asylum system that the British public expect.
But Anne, look, there are so many problems with the statistics that have emerged today, but one that struck me is that Indians are being let in legally in very large numbers. So the fact that they are illegally crossing the Channel too shows that these arrivals in small boats are on the large economic migrants, not asylum seekers.
I don't think there's ever been any doubt that the majority of people who come here on small boats, there will be some real asylum seekers among them, but the majority of them are economic migrants. They're looking for a better life. And one can understand that, but the fact is that we can't take everybody who wants to come here for a better life. We have to have rules, we have to apply those rules, and we have to take firm action to deter people from trying to get round them. And it is, of course, the last of those actions that we don't do. And we've just seen in that clip now, promises. It's always jam tomorrow. It's always action tomorrow. We're going to send them to Rwanda. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. For heaven's sake. They've had 13 years to sort this out.
And could this be fatal for your former party, I mean, the party that you loved? Because we were promised net migration in the tens of thousands. I mean, Rishi Sunak today doesn't seem to want to pledge to even get it under 500,000 a year.
Well, he's finally learnt the lesson, finally, that all these promises that we're going to reduce it to such and such a figure, which, I mean, started with Cameron, he was going to get it under 200,000 and all the rest of it. Then it was going to come down to the tens of thousands. We've heard all these pledges, all these promises. They have never once been delivered. And I think Rishi has learnt that and knows that if he says that he's going to reduce it, to 100,000 or whatever he might pluck out of the air, he knows that he'll be caught in a year's time, right just before the general election, which isn't terribly wise. That's why he's not prepared to pledge it, because they're not actually in control of it. Now, there are two completely separate issues here. The first is lawful immigration, which we should be totally in control of, not obliged to accept people under free movement now that we've left the EU. It's one of the few gains that was quite clear and very, very transparent. We can control our legal immigration figures. We're not doing it. And as for the ludicrous illegal immigration that is coming in unchecked, despite all the promises, all the money paid to France, all the big headlines about Rwanda, they've lost control. So they've lost, rather they're not taking control of legal immigration because they could, and they've lost control of illegal immigration. And don't forget, there's also all the illegal immigration that isn't happening via the channel, but is happening elsewhere as well. So it's not just those two things you're looking at. You've got all this other stuff going on as well. They are completely out of control. Now, your question was, could this rebound on them in the next election? The answer is not could, but will. It will rebound on them because they've made too many silly promises. And if they think they can go into the election promising yet more action and not delivering any, it's not going to happen.
Well, indeed. And he had one chance, which was this week before the figures came out, and all he did was say that students can't bring in their dependents, which will help, but it's not enough, Anne. It's not enough.
Well, you say it'll help. The fact is that in the case of students, many of those dependents, the spouses, that is, not the children, but the spouses earn. They work. They support the student. They contribute to the economy. So they're not going to be allowed in, but the student who doesn't contribute to the economy is.
Good point. Anne Widdecombe, former Tory minister. Worrying times for your party at the moment, Anne. Former party. Thank you so much. Coming up. Yes, I knew you'd pull me up on that. Coming up, as bombshell Tory WhatsApp messages are leaked, revealing a new civil war over the witch hunt against Boris Johnson. Why is the party not standing up for the former PM? Former Conservative Education Minister Andrea Jenkins, who was exposed for criticising Rishi Sunak in that Sly News text leak, speaks out live soon. But next, is former number 10 aide Gito Harry right that the establishment is pursuing a vendetta against Boris Johnson? And does handing the messages of senior ministers to the COVID inquiry set a dangerous precedent? We'll debate that next, plus a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press, back in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, after the witch hunters of Westminster hand over Boris Johnson's diaries to the police without permission, is his former aide, Guito Harry, right that there is an establishment vendetta against him? And has the COVID inquiry gone mad with power by threatening the government with criminal sanctions if they fail to hand over personal WhatsApp messages? Those are the questions I'll be posing to my superstar panel next. And tonight, I'm joined by Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicol. Plus, Andrea Jenkins, the former Tory minister exposed for criticising Rishi Sunak and bombshell leaked messages, speaks out publicly about the fresh civil war that has erupted in the Tory party. She's fired up and ready to defend Boris shortly. Also on the way tonight, after a disastrous week, both reputationally and legally for the Sussexes, could this string of public humiliations be having an impact on the pair's marriage? And after the Princess of Wales was said to upstage the King at his beloved Chelsea Flower Show, could there be a royal rumble for public attention not seen since the days of Diana? The man who knows all things about the King's competitive marriage to the People's Princess, Diana's Rock, and former butler Paul Burrell gives his expert analysis in Uncancelled. As a controversial new Daily Express column compares Philip Schofield to Prince Andrew, saying both have treated underlings with absolute contempt, was scandal hit Sco fortunate to have lasted as long as he did? We'll debate that in the media buzz. And according to the warped logic of Just Stop Oil, even plants at the Chelsea Flower Show are destroying the planet.
We are part of Just Stop Oil. We're asking the government to stop licensing fossil fuels.
Yes, stick around to see how one passionate gardener rooted out the eco-terrorist. That's not to be missed. There'll also be a new Greatest Britain and Union Jackass name before the night is out. Oh, and the first front pages are hot off the press and arriving in mere seconds right after the news headlines with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you and good evening. Our top story on GB News tonight. A man has been arrested after crashing his car into the gates of Downing Street in London this afternoon. Armed officers arrested the man on suspicion of criminal damage and dangerous driving. The incident is not being treated as terror-related. Footage obtained by GB News shows officers dragging the suspect out of the car and then handcuffing him face down on the pavement. The area was immediately cordoned off, but Whitehall has since reopened. There are no reports of any injuries. An eyewitness told us what he saw.
Police were very quick to respond. Children ran away panicking. We ran over in excitement almost with the cameras. And it wasn't long before the police had him out of the vehicle face down. We were pointing tasers at him. Maybe 3 minutes, there was like 10, 12 police vehicles, and it just seemed almost like emotionless. And then like they escorted him about 10 yards that way, and I got a video of him going across. He was white, grey straggly hair.
Well, in other news today, Number 10 has refused calls for Rishi Sunak to apologise, despite failing to reduce net migration numbers, which have now risen to record levels. ONS data released today shows migration numbers rose to 606,000 last year, even after repeated government pledges to bring overall numbers down. The Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, says the government will keep its promise.
Net migration is far too high. This is placing intolerable pressure on public services, on housing supply, and our ability to integrate people. We've made a very significant intervention this week, which will make a tangible difference, reducing the number of student dependents that come to our universities, because universities should be in the education business, not the immigration business.
Well, Rishi Sunak has welcomed the reduction in the energy price cap, describing it as a major milestone towards his goal of halving inflation. Ofgem has announced the typical annual household energy bill will fall to a maximum of £2,074 a year. That's from July, and it's a drop of £426. Ofgem says the first price drop in 18 months reflects recent falls in wholesale energy prices. Now, 9 people have been arrested over the disorder in Cardiff that followed the deaths of 2 teenage boys on Monday night. 16-year-old Kyrie Sullivan and 15-year-old Harvey Evans were killed in the Ely area while riding on an e-bike. The police watchdog is investigating after CCTV footage emerged showing a police van following the teens shortly before their death. 15 officers were injured and cars were set alight in the violence that ensued. All 9 people remain in custody on suspicion of rioting. And lastly, police in Portugal have confirmed the searches near a reservoir in relation to the disappearance of Madeleine McCann have now officially concluded. Portuguese, German and British police officers have been investigating a remote area near the Algarve coastal resort where Madeleine went missing in 2007. A source close to the investigation told GB News there is nothing to report. After 3 days of intense searching, the authorities are sending any materials found to Germany for testing. You're up to date on TV, online, DAB+ radio and the TuneIn app. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our media buzz, and first front pages are in. The Metro leads with Home Office Minister Robert Jenrick accusing universities of being in the immigration business as data is released showing the highest levels of net migration to the UK ever. The Daily Express splashes with the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, we must and will cut the number of people moving to the UK. That's in response to those record figures. My superstar panel, back with me now, top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate and top Tory Sean Bailey, and the author Amy Nicole. Now, Boris Johnson loyalists have vowed to start fighting back after details of alleged visits by friends to the former PM's Grace and Favour home at Chequers during lockdown were sent to detectives. Allies are said to be furious at the police stitch-up and could go on strike and refuse to cooperate with the government over the latest Partygate probe. One ally told the political editor for the Daily Mail, Jason Groves, some of his supporters are telling him that if the government isn't going to stop this, then it is time to go to war. And yesterday, Boris fired his first shot by sacking his government lawyers after discovering they passed on information without his knowledge to the police. Launching a separate attack, Boris's former Director of Communications, Gito Harry, shed more light on the nefarious establishment's pursuit of the former PM last year, writing in a column for the Daily Express, as the inevitable became imminent, the tension began to rise. Psycho Sue was referred to as destroyer of the nation who was trying to do us in. But the thing is, Alison Pearson, whatever you think of Boris Johnson, Harry is right that there is a vendetta against him. The Blob are out to get him. That is almost undeniable now.
Yeah, it's petty, it's vindictive, it's clearly politically motivated. It's also costing civil service time and money, isn't it? And you really think, I mean, how much longer can this go on, Dan? It's absolutely ludicrous, isn't it? I mean, you know, who can remember whether they had someone over for tea in July 2020? It's absolutely ridiculous. There's also this business about the Cabinet Office, which is seemingly handed over Boris's private messages to the police. There are, by sheer coincidence, a number of prominent Labour people have spouses working in the Cabinet Office. Who could ever have guessed that? You know, so I think it is politically motivated. It's like a kind of series of drive-by shootings. We've seen them, Priti Patel, Dominic Raab, of course, Suella, for the, you know, the hugely important matter of speeding points. Speeding points, who cares?
For the umpteenth time, they're going to keep coming for her.
We've got a food inflation is at 19%. Nobody in the supermarket trying to pay the bill is saying, have you seen that woman's speeding points? It's absolutely ludicrous. And of course, with Boris, there's an element of jealousy thrown into the mix. I agree with Lord Cruddas. I think we should have an amnesty on these so-called lockdown crimes. Lots of elements of lockdown was absolutely ludicrous anyway. Can we not please move beyond it?
We need to. But Sean Bailey, there are lots of questions about this. I mean, for example, Boris is talking about suing the Home Office. The Cabinet Office. Do you think that it was illegal for them to hand over his personal diaries without permission to the police?
Look, I'm no legal expert, but there's two things that has to be said. Firstly, it's his private diary. They're meant to be acting for him, so they should have informed him. And what's really interesting about the things that are happening to Boris, nobody ever gets fingered for it. Nobody's ever said this person's wrong or that's wrong. Even if when he's proved to be right, that person just disappears into the ether and doesn't face anything. So the Boris supporters who are saying it's time to go to war, it's time to take people to court, I think they're probably correct. They have to do that. And secondly, the things she's asking for, some of them seem incredibly...
This is the head of the COVID inquiry, the official COVID inquiry.
They seem incredibly personal. And she's been using words like she wants to know what Boris was thinking. What we want to know is what the NHS were thinking. This is an organisation that we give £140 billion to annually, and in our hour of greatest need, there's a great argument that they didn't step up.
I mean, Alison,
so we want to know what they were doing, not what Boris was doing.
Indeed, but just quickly, this is a really tough one, isn't it? Because in some ways, you think, my goodness, it would be absolutely fascinating to see all of these WhatsApp messages, because I bet Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson conceded numerous times that the lockdowns were a complete fallacy and were doing no good. However, isn't there a limit? Don't politicians, even our leaders, need to be able to have private conversations?
I think they do, but I think it's legitimate for certain elements of it to be, you know, where they're talking about the vaccine rollout or they're talking about certain data and so on. I think that should be in the public preserve. I mean, you know, a lot of us thoroughly enjoyed the Matt Hancock WhatsApp messages where we learned in the lockdown files, where Isabel Oakeshott leaked the WhatsApp messages, that Hancock was saving a variant to scare the pants off people.
There's two things I'd say. Firstly, this is the death of privacy. At some point, you have to separate the individual from their role. So yes, you are the Prime Minister, but you're also Boris Johnson.
Because the thing is, no one's asking for transcripts of phone
but the most important thing is, I worked at Number 10.
Yeah.
And a government needs to be able to have private conversations.
Not if it's illegal.
Oh, no. There's conversations that a government will have to test ideas, to get to the very bottom of things that you wouldn't want to have in that way in the public arena. And to release them could be damaging. And I don't mean just for the past, for Boris. I mean for our future, because it means governments won't have realistic conversations.
I think you right to privacy when you break the law, and that's where they're duty-bound to...
You don't know that anybody broke the law, and that's an assumption. That's something you just said. That's a complete assumption.
That's what potentially
is not enough.
And anyway, if it has, it's just a cherry on top of the cake of Boris Johnson's career, which is a pack of lies. And he will always be the first and only Prime Minister to break the law.
But this shows you that it's a witch hunt. Hold on,
this the same as a speeding fine.
This inquiry is about.
I don't know. Call me old-fashioned, but I prefer my public
This
servants to not
inquiry is about COVID, about the effect it had on 70 million people, and they're talking about Boris.
You know,
it's a witch
hunt. Amy, do you think there's a witch hunt against Boris Johnson?
I think that Boris Johnson has done more to divide this country than any other politician, and he has changed politics for good.
You've obviously not heard of Nicola Sturgeon
or Tony Blair
or Sadiq Khan.
The distrust. Do you know
or
what?
Keir Starmer.
At least with New Labour, with Tony Blair, obviously there were faults, but they kept a lot of
Well, they had an illegal war, according to a number of people.
Since 2019, Boris Johnson
And
has
remember,
not...
Blair was questioned by cops over the Cash for Honours scandal.
Right.
And said that he would stand down as Prime Minister, which is the only reason they didn't interview under
But
caution.
the difference between those two is they kept promises and they had...
Well, actually, I would argue the Cash for Honours scandal was a hell of a lot worse, Alison Pearson, than eating a cake
I would
in
argue
number 10 Downing
pulling
Street.
7 million pensioners out of poverty, 4 million children out of poverty, introducing minimum wage is quite a success. What's Boris Johnson's legacy? He doesn't have one.
Boris Johnson kept the promise made to Brexit voters. Basically, he and Dominic Cummings had to rugby tackle the entire establishment.
Boris Johnson lied. He didn't even believe in the vote. The Vote Leave campaign and Boris Johnson's work on the Vote Leave campaign has damaged politics more, and it will not be recovered. And it has damaged the Conservative Party as well. The Conservative Party is done because of his
actions. You could say
actions.
the same things about the Remain campaign. You could say that this witch hunt is based on that.
Well, by the way, there was the biggest lie, wasn't there? They said that the economy was going to crash the day after we voted.
Well, only 8% of people are happy with
moving on, because Donald
Brexit,
Trump's Republican rival for the White House, Ron DeSantis, launched his hotly anticipated presidential election bid on Twitter Spaces last night. But read Ron's announcement in front of Elon Musk and another 600,000 people fell a little bit flat because it was marred by several technical glitches caused by the legion of fans trying to tune in. Trump wasted no time in ripping into his rival, the bloke he's lovingly dubbed, or maybe not so lovingly dubbed, Ron DeSanctimonious. This is what he posted on his Truth social platform.
To be an American, and I won't forget the men who died.
We are kind of melting the servers.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free.
Commitment to freedom, and is willing to put his money where his mouth is. Upset the narrative control imposed on us by our government.
Oh, it's going to be a right Republican rumble between those two. And I can't wait. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Alison Pearson, do stand by, because coming up, as broadcaster and journalist Virginia Blackburn writes a controversial Daily Express column drawing parallels between Philip Schofield and Prince Andrew. Is she justified saying that both have, quote, treated underlings with absolute contempt? My Superstar panel will be back to debate that soon. But next, as bombshell Tory WhatsApp messages are leaked, revealing a new civil war over the witch hunt against Boris Johnson, one of the politicians exposed, the former Conservative Education Minister Andrea Jenkins speaks out for the first time. You won't want to miss what one of Boris Johnson's biggest allies has to say straight after this.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world. The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better.
Crop failures, famine, war, suffering on a scale completely unimaginable.
We are putting the cart before the horse. As Charles I said at the scaffold, he was the true defender of liberty.
Yeah, I've completely derailed the conversation.
Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now? Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Andrea Jenkins and Paul Burrell on the way. But just in case you missed the top of the show, bit of an exciting announcement for you. We are taking the show on the road. On Thursday, June the 15th, I'm going to be bringing you Dan Wootton tonight, live from Lee, with none other than the former PM, Liz Truss. But of course, you have to be part of this. We want you with us at our exclusive town hall event, where Liz is going to escape the Westminster bubble and tackle the real issues facing Brits today. Plus, how on earth can we save the country from the anti-growth coalition? The political establishment maybe thought they'd silence Liz Truss, but she's got way more to say. Lines like this.
Not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
Ms Truss, enough already.
She was definitely right about that, and Liz told us it's great to be returning to Lee with Dan Wootton and GB News. I want to listen to the ideas and the issues people feel passionately about. Getting out of Westminster and hearing the practical solutions to the big issues we face as a country is vital if we want to get Britain growing again. So look, you want to be part of this with us. I'd love to meet you there. You can apply for tickets using the QR code, which is on your screen right now. You can also apply via our website. New website, actually, gbnews.com. But now the Partygate witch hunt was revived this week after Boris Johnson's ministerial diary was leaked and he was referred to police over more frivolous COVID rule-breaking allegations. So far, Rishi Sunak has stayed silent on the woke blob and MSM campaign to finish the former PM. And bombshell WhatsApp group messages posted yesterday and immediately leaked to Sly News have exposed a fresh Tory civil war with MPs clashing over Sunak's refusal to publicly back Boris. So Thurrock MP Jackie Doyle Price posted FFS. Who on earth is spouting this bonkersness? Are you determined to turn our party into a skip fire? With Simon Hoare adding, would the last Tory MP to leave the building please turn off the lights? The nonsense, self-destroying crap has to end or our party dies. But former Education Minister Andrea Jenkins then put her foot down, blasting, I don't like leakers, I prefer to say things to people's face. However, it is interesting some of those commenting were happy to speak out publicly against the Boris and Liz administrations, so maybe less sanctimony and hypocrisy. Clearly, many in the party are unhappy, but those at the top are not doing anything about this to bring people together. And earlier today, an anonymous former minister admitted to the Tortoise website that MPs were discussing submitting letters of no confidence in Sunak over his handling of the issue. So to speak out for the first time since the leak of her messages, the former Tory Education Minister, Andrea Jenkins. So, Andrea, look, firstly, how predictable that those messages were leaked to Sly News. It just proves, doesn't it, that unfortunately there are members of your own party, Andrea, who are cooperating with the Blob and the MSM to bring down folks on the right of the party. Suella, Dominic Raab, now Boris.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's always been very leaky, the Cons WhatsApp group. It's actually made up of, the sycophants who praise the PM and his wife continuously because they want a job, or it's lots of hypocrisy, as we've seen there. I mean, it's interesting, Dan, because Simon Hoare, during the Theresa May years when I was publicly speaking out about her rubbish Brexit deal, I had to ban him from my Twitter because he was he kept hassling me. So, this is what I mean. I can't stand hypocrisy.
No, indeed. Of course. But look, Andrea, the point is, why is Rishi Sunak not prepared to back the former Prime Minister, Boris Johnson?
I agree with you. I mean, we're all Conservatives, but let's also not forget who's in charge of the Cabinet Office and the Deputy Prime Minister. Oliver Dowden, he was the first to resign, which had this chain of events with Boris as well. Now, I think that,
So do you think, sorry to interrupt, Andrea, but that's quite a key point. Do you think the Cabinet Office is deliberately conspiring against Boris Johnson?
I mean, I think the certain members of the whole civil service, we've seen it in the Home Office department, we've seen it clearly in the Cabinet Office as well, where they're trying to bring down, key members of government, especially Brexiteers, well, only Brexiteers, that's what they're trying to do. So without a doubt, this is what's going on and it's got to stop. I mean, so what saddens me, I had a great private office at the civil servants, and it's these senior civil servants who's actually, they are betraying the junior members of the civil service and giving them a bad name. I mean, look in recent years as well, Dan, look how during the head of ethics brought her own karaoke machine to the lockdown party, yet it was Boris who got the blame when he wasn't even there at the parties.
Very good point. So, Andrew, can we talk about the raw politics of this? Because this Tortoise report suggests that there are MPs who are favourable to Boris Johnson. You're, of course, one of his biggest allies. And remember, he was going to get the votes at the last leadership contest against Rishi Sunak. He did have, I think it was the 99 MPs or whatever it was, required to get on the ballot. Are you considering writing letters of no confidence in Rishi Sunak this October?
Not at the moment, because we're walking this tightrope, because look at the polling. I think it would be political suicide to, topple another prime minister. It'd mean a general election. So I'd like to see some loyalty from the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak. We're all Conservatives, and he stabbed Boris in the back when Boris plucked him out of obscurity as a junior minister. And I think it's about time he shows some loyalty. And I mean, clearly there's some campaign, whether it's civil servants or it's members within our own party, who are trying to make sure that Boris never comes back. Because he is popular. He's popular in my area as well. But I think that, we've got to remember we would much rather see Conservatives elected into government than, the woker Rati of a Labour government who will destroy our country beyond recognition with their wokey policies. So I think we need to remember that, party leaders do come and go, as we've seen over the years, but ultimately we want to see a Conservative government elected with real Conservative policies as well, I hasten to add, Dan.
Indeed. Andrea Jenkins, former Tory Education Minister, great to speak to you tonight. Thank you so much. Now, coming up in Uncancelled, with reports Prince Harry is spending time alone at a hotel, is the first sign of cracks in the Sussex's once strong marriage. Well, Princess Diana's former butler, her rock, Paul Burrell, gives his exclusive insight on this very shortly. But next in the media buzz, as a controversial new Daily Express column compares Philip Schofield to Prince Andrew, saying both have treated underlings with absolute contempt. Was Sco fortunate to have lasted as long as he did? My superstar panel return to debate that in just a moment.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Start the day with GB News.
We catch up on all the big stories you didn't hear the night before.
And take a look at what the world's talking about this morning. That's right, Monday to Thursdays from 6 o'clock. It's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Straight after breakfast, join us, Bev Turner and Andrew Pearce. We're going to take you through till noon.
We'll be tackling the big topics of the day, including the things that the other channels just won't talk about. If it's happening here. Wake up to mornings on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our media buzz. More front pages have just been delivered. And well, the Eye says the UK population is set to overtake France for the first time on record. Britain on course to become Europe's second largest population for the first time. That's thanks to net migration hitting a new high of over 606,000. The Daily Telegraph leads with the sudden jump in mortgage rates after core inflation hit its highest level since the early 1990s. And the Daily Mail leads with a simple but crucial question, one that we're going to be coming to very shortly. Will anyone stop these eco-clowns? And I'll tell you what they did and show you it actually in just one moment. Let me bring my superstar panel back in, though. Top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson. former Conservative London mayoral candidate and top Tory Sean Bailey and the author Amy Nicol. Now, Britain arrived at immigration D-Day today as shocking new statistics, as I just mentioned, confirmed net migration at a record high. That's despite repeated Tory promises to reduce the figure. But instead of answering tough policy questions from the country's most serious political journalists here on GB News, our embattled Prime Minister decided instead to go on the even more embattled TV show this morning to answer questions like this.
These Jilly Cooper books true? Do you really, Are you really into those books? Is that not true?
Yes, that is.
It is true.
Very unclear how that has emerged.
Is it true?
Yes, I'm. Yes,
I love a Jilly Cooper book. They're amazing.
Which ones?
Can't remember. They're just the sexy bits.
Okay.
And like Sunak, it's been an arduous week for the poor folk at This Morning after long-term host Philip Schofield was finally given the chop. In fact, there are some reports tonight it came after Holly Willoughby actually went over the head of both of her direct bosses to the chief executive of ITV, close pal of Meghan Markle, Carolyn McCall. And now the leading Daily Express columnist, previous guest on This Morning actually, Virginia Blackburn, has quite an interesting comparison to draw with the show's recently departed star. She writes, as for Philip, he also reminds me of a member of the royal family, Prince Andrew. Philip's sins are as nothing compared to the disgraced Duke of York, but both also have something in common. They are said to have treated underlings with absolute contempt. There's another lesson for us all. Treat people well as you work your way up the greasy pole, because you're going to need them when you come crashing back down. So, Alison Pearson, this is a fascinating comparison to me, because I've certainly been struck this week by the total lack of support of Philip Schofield, for someone who for 20 years of his life has been surrounded by the leading figures of the entertainment industry, television, politics, sport. Not one of them has spoken out publicly.
No, I think that there's that background thing of him having been an unpleasant piece of work, which you've alluded to, haven't you, from your own experience. And the same with Prince Andrew. None of the courtiers really wanting to jump to his defence. And I think that that sort of sign that not knowing who the little people are. I mean, in the Duke of York's notorious case with Virginia Giuffre, you know, it was literally that he couldn't remember having met her, probably because she was so inconsequential in his arrogant, supercilious worldview. And I think perhaps Phil and Andrew onto some remote desert island for some kind of competition.
Well, at least maybe they could do some nice charity work. Apparently, Amy, the BBC are trying to sign Philip Schofield for Strictly Come Dancing now.
Oh. Do you know, that would be quite interesting, though, because it involves public vote, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So we could really put this to the test. I don't know. I still don't feel completely sure. Everyone's saying Philip Schofield was unpleasant. He was this, he was that. I mean, I was on This Morning with him once, and he was actually fine. He spoke to me. He's quite polite. And I want more specifics. I want to know exactly, you know, why he was so unpleasant, what happened, because I feel like.
Well, you've heard a lot of them.
No, I have, but I just want it pinned down. Like, how was he unpleasant?
But that's the challenge. Is if you're unpleasant to underlings, and eventually somebody up from upstairs gets them, the point is those underlings will never come out. They have careers to build, and they still feel vulnerable. And that's why I don't know what Philip was like, but that's why he could go for years doing that, because no one will stand up to him. I spoke to a young person I used to work with, and she called it the Weinstein effect. She said, because these people have your career in their hands, they can treat you as badly as they like. And if that's the case, it then shows you why Philip has had no defenders. Because even people on his level, they will feel bad about how he's potentially, allegedly behaved.
Do you know what? My mum was at Wimbledon, and she saw Philip Schofield. He was on the phone. He was being awfully rude to the taxi driver.
Yeah, see, eventually it catches up. It catches you up.
Categorical proof.
Yeah,
that's it.
If my mum said it's
true,
it's true.
What did you make of the decision, Alison, for Sunak to only do one broadcast interview today on This Morning Sofa with Craig Doyle and Alison Hammond?
Well, let's forget the scandal about the dreadful immigration numbers. I mean, Rishi Sunak is a Jilly Cooper fan. Yeah, right. Former head boy of Winchester. I think we should give
the man of the people.
I think I think
Jilly
it's one of
Cooper
those
is good, though.
No, I'm a huge Jilly Cooper fan, but I would like to have a Rupert Campbell-Black sort of, question time with Rishi Sunak, answering questions on the Rutshire Chronicles to actually prove that he'd done it. No, I mean, it was absolute pat a cake television, wasn't it, really? It was a huge day, a day of shame, really, for the Conservative government, and he didn't want any tough questions.
Well, no, of course, because, Sean, I'm a huge fan of Alison Hammond, actually, and this bloke, Craig Doyle, tried to hold Rishi Sunak to account, but he's not a journalist, is he?
No, and look, if you're the Prime Minister, you're up to dealing with most journalists. You need a top journalist to pin you to the ground. And what would have happened there? They said, look, Rishi, you're going to have a rough day. Let's do our best to minimise said rough day. Talk about your love for Jilly Cooper. I remember someone saying to me, Sean, when I was running, they had a rough day, and someone said to me, we'll get you a nice interview. And the people are, what are you into, Sean? I love Star Wars, and I read, Warhammer books. And I tried to steer the conversation down that way, and the journalists followed me. And that's what the Prime Minister did this morning. In a way, it shows he has some skill as a politician.
Yeah.
What would you have asked him? What would have been your top question?
I would have, like you earlier, and you also refused to answer the question, I would say, no, I want a number. I want a number, Rishi. If you're not going to give me a number, there's no point continuing this conversation because we deserve a number when I'm talking about net migration.
That's why I gave you a number. But you've got to understand,
exactly.
the
Under
PM doesn't want to fail.
Well done, Sean Bailey, one of the few Tories today who wants to give me a damn number. Now, the eco-loons at Just Stop Oil never have shown much sign of brains, but their latest stunt has to be the most stupid yet. Watch as the middle-class, privileged, champagne socialist yobs attack the Chelsea Flower Show because nothing says saving the environment like actually destroying the environment.
What is the point in a garden if you can't feed yourself? Shame on you. What is the point in a garden if you can't eat? The people are what is the point in tradition? What is the point in tradition if society is collapsing around you?
But thankfully, one woman fought back against the eco-terrorists in the only way that a gardener would know how.
We are part of Just Stop Oil. We're asking the government to stop licensing fossil fuels, which are a death sentence to us all.
Believe you me, that's the closest those dirty hippies have come to in weeks. Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, stand by, because coming up in tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass, was Gary Lineker deserving of a Human Rights Award from Amnesty International for nothing more other than making an egregious Nazi jibe on Twitter? My superstar panel will be back to nominate their GBUJ very shortly. But next, in Uncancelled, as the Sussexes suffer reputational and legal hits during a difficult week, is Harry and Meghan's marriage coming under pressure? And is Kate stealing the limelight away from the new king, just as the late Princess Diana did? Well, Diana's former butler and her rock, Paul Burrell, with exclusive royal insight in just 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
Time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And before we get to Harry and Meghan's latest crisis across the pond, back at home, royal commentators and royal family insiders have been talking about a potential rift between working members of the monarchy. It's the Chelsea Flower Show this week, and the King, who, as we know, is a lover of all things nature, appeared alongside the Queen to present gardeners with a medal in memory of his late mother, Queen Elizabeth II. But eyebrows were raised when the Princess of Wales also attended the Flower Show on the same day, overshadowing the King's visit and bringing back memories of his battle for press attention with the late Princess Diana. Well, few people know better the toll that Diana's fame had on her marriage with Prince Charles then. It's her rock and former butler Paul Burrell, who I'm delighted to say joins me live now. So, Paul, what do you make of this? Because at the end of the day, Kate did overshadow the King in terms of media coverage, but I don't feel that would have been a deliberate move on Kate's part. It's not like the battles that were going on when Harry and Meghan were here in the royal family and they were purposefully attending events just to steal attention away from the Cambridges.
No, Dan, I'm glad you asked me this question, and I'm very happy to speak out, because Kate has never put a foot wrong, and she has become an icon in her own right and has successfully slipped into those famous shoes of Princess Diana. She is doing an incredible job, and I don't think for a minute that the King would mind sharing some of the spotlight with his daughter-in-law, because after all, this is the future. And wouldn't we all want to see beautiful pictures of Kate rather than pictures of Charles and Camilla? So I'm one that says, good on you, Kate, and keep doing what you're doing, because on this side of the Atlantic, you are carrying the torch for the royal family. And without you, I don't know what would happen. You are really supporting all of this house of cards is resting on your shoulders.
Yeah, so actually it's quite a good thing in a way that there is all of this attention. Paul, you do have to admit, though, in the days of Diana and Charles, the marriage, the King really did struggle with the attention that Diana received. So are you sure that he's totally relaxed about this?
Well, you see, in the old days, there was a rivalry between Diana and Charles, and Charles was jealous of Diana's popularity. It's documented now. I saw it at first hand. He didn't like her being as popular as she was, because it was like a star is born. Her star rose and his fell. And he once said to her, I married you and made you royal. Without me, you'll be nobody. So I think there is an element of jealousy in the King, but I think he's also looking towards the future. I think he thinks, well, William and Kate are the best people for the job. They are following in my wake. I am not going to be king for a very long time. They are waiting to take over the reins. And I think he's looking towards the future. I really do.
I hope you're right.
And plus, they're taking the weight off his shoulders to some extent.
No, I hope you're right.
This is a tough job.
I hope you're right. All I would say is that the man who broke the story was Richard Eden, who is the diary editor of the Daily Mail, very credible journalist. He seemed to be speaking to sources within the royal households. But look, let's hope that Charles has moved on, because I think he does have to realise that William and Kate are going to become the stars, and that's a good thing for the monarchy.
Yes, yes, their star is rising. But you know the king does have quite a temper, and he does voice his opinion very readily in inner circles. So perhaps some of that has leaked out, and his momentarily lapse has reached the ears of journalists. Because as you saw in the carriage, he had a few things to say at the coronation, things that were going wrong. When he signed his declaration,
and when his pen leaked,
things were not going right.
I know.
Yes, so
but you know, I don't. But to be honest, I don't mind a monarch with a bit of a temper. I think it's important that things are right. But I just hope that he accepts that Kate is the star now, and that we need her to be the star. But look, Paul, last week, Harry and Meghan, let's just be honest about it, they got found out for sensationalising what they claimed was a dangerous high-speed car chase involving a paparazzi in New York. Then, just days later, things turned from bad to worse for the Duke after he lost his latest High Court bid to use the UK police force as his own personal security team. Now, Paul, there's speculation that the pair's public humiliation could actually be impacting their marriage, with sources stateside claiming that Harry often sleeps alone at a local Montecito hotel, even when Meghan and the kids are at home. Now, Paul, look, there's a big debate about this because, of course, they insist the marriage is very strong. Camilla Tominay's story in the Daily Telegraph suggests maybe it's not, because why on earth would you need a hotel in Montecito when you've got a mansion with 16 bathrooms? You know Harry very well. Are you worried about him, Paul? Because he just seems to feel so lost and look so sad at the moment.
Yeah, I've always been worried about Harry. I've always worried about him. And am I the only person in the United Kingdom that is thinking, has Harry finally woken up to the truth? Has he finally seen the truth and what his wife is doing? That he's been brainwashed and that he's been mesmerized by her beauty or something? Because we all know that, but he doesn't seem to see it. I personally know Harry, and I think he's always wanted to be a father. He always wanted children. I think this element of splitting from his family right now is a little premature. I think he would want to stay in that driving seat to watch his children grow, because if he left this relationship now, he'd lose his children because she'd keep them in America and he wouldn't see them. But I have no doubt that when this happens, because we all know that it will happen, when it does happen, he will return to the United Kingdom. And I think his father, the King, and his brother, the Prince of Wales, will both greet him back into the country with open arms. I think there is an element of Harry we all love. We just don't understand why he's doing what he's doing at the moment.
Isn't one of the risks, though, Paul, and you see this all the time, when someone is impacted as a child by a very messy divorce from their parents, they often stay in an unhappy relationship for a very, very long time because they don't want to put their children through the same thing.
That's true. That was true on Diana herself, because she said to me, I don't want a broken marriage. I want to bring our children up in a secure marriage. And she battled for that all her days. She wanted to have a family unit to bring up her children, because she too had suffered in a broken marriage. It does bring unhappiness to a child, a broken marriage, and that insecurity that Diana felt came from that situation, because she always felt it was her fault. And Diana always said, it's my fault that Mummy left because I arrived on the scene. Of course it wasn't. It was nothing to do with the child. It was everything to do with the parent. So I think Harry, because of all of that and because of the history, I think he will try and stick with the programme for as long as he can. And you will inevitably see cracks in this marriage, because we know with great press and great criticism and world fame comes great pressure. And this couple will have great pressure on their shoulders.
Indeed.
I personally do not want to see Harry unhappy again. I've seen too many tears. I want to see him very happy. I want to see him and his family grow. But, you know, there's a niggling doubt in the back of my head, Dan. And I can't be alone in thinking that, surely.
No, you're definitely not alone in thinking that, Paul. It is a worry, and I especially worry about the fact that Meghan will be particularly conscious of the fact that she's now being viewed as a laughingstock, and she might want to reinvent. And when she wants to reinvent, we know how brutal she can be. But look, Paul Burrell, brilliant to speak with you. We're speaking to you next week, so I cannot wait for that. But have a brilliant weekend, Paul Burrell, Diana's Rock. Time now to reveal tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass. And I'm going to bring my superstar panel back in now. And you know the very exciting news, Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicol are all coming on the road with me to Lee with Liz Truss. And you can get tickets to that fabulous event right now at GBnews.com. We're so excited to meet you in the flesh. But Alison Pearson, who's your GB nominee?
My GB nominee, we don't know her name, sadly, but the marvellous lady in the green skirt at the Chelsea Flower Show who turned the hose on the Just Stop Oil numpties. If the police won't drag them away, it's going to be up to a member of the general public.
Oh, can we have another look at that moment, please?
We are part of Just Stop Oil. We're asking the government to stop licensing fossil fuels, which are a death sentence to us all.
Oh my goodness, please, if you are that amazing woman watching us right now, email me, dan@gbnews.com. We want you on this show because you are a hero. So with you on that. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My nominee is Brian Cox, the Succession actor, who said it was bollocks that only people with a certain experience could play a certain role. It's called acting for a reason, and it's great that someone is standing up to something.
Shall we have a little listen to what he had to say?
What about this idea that only actors who've had certain experiences should play certain roles? We mentioned it.
Absolute.
Why?
Because it's the imagination.
Couldn't agree more. Amy Nicol, your nominee, please.
So I've picked Gary Lineker this week because
of course you have.
He's received an award from Amnesty International, a Sport and Human Rights Award.
Yeah, I know. I spoke about it in The Clash. Utterly ridiculous. The greatest Britain is the Hosepipe Woman.
Hey.
I want to find Hosepipe Woman. Hero. Union jackass time now. Alison Pearson, can you do the double? Who's your nominee?
Rishi Sunak says he knows that immigration needs to come down and he thinks he wants to bring him down. But what is his job? He's the Prime Minister. He's able to bring immigration down.
Indeed. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
Mine is the Just Stop All idiots who attacked a garden, a sustainable garden at the Chelsea Flower Show. Even in their utopia, surely we'll be allowed to keep our gardens.
And Amy Nicol, your Union jackass nominee.
Well, it has to be the Boris Johnson for his alleged soirees at Chequers and also failing to pick up his own legal bills, despite making around £5 million since leaving office.
Well, to be honest, I'm pretty sure he regrets that now, because if he'd funded his own lawyers, maybe they wouldn't have shopped him to the cops.
By sticking to the law. God, imagine.
Well, look, it's clearly not going to be Boris Johnson, given he is the victim of a witch hunt by the Blob and the MSM. No.
The Blob made him have the party.
It's the Just Stop Oil protesters. Yes, I'm sticking to a similar theme. Great choice, Sean Bailey. What absolute fools. Do you know, I'd actually love to see them all locked up, seriously, because as I keep saying, this is not protest, as Gary Lineker says, this is criminal damage. Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicol, my superstar panel, thank you so much. Thank you for your company all week. Remember, gbnews.com if you want to join us and Lee with Liz Truss next month. But next up, it's Headliners. Have a brilliant weekend. Good night. Back on Monday. Back on Monday.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.